Welcome to another edition of Right Voices. I'm John Hart, the co-founder of C3 Solutions, the conservative coalition for climate solutions, and I'm the editor of our news magazine, C3. Today, we're honored to be joined again by Congressman Ron Estes, who has represented Kansas's 4th congressional district since 2017. Congressman Estes previously served as the Kansas State Treasurer from 2011 to 2017, and he now serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the Budget Committee, the Educational Workforce Committee, and the Joint Economic Committee. Congressman, welcome back.
Well, great, John. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So we've got a lot of serious business to talk about today in the nation, but I had to take a moment. As you know, I grew up in Kansas City. You're from Wichita. How about them Chiefs?
Yeah, let's go Chiefs. It's America's team now, and you're looking at that. They've been so successful the last few years, and it's great. It's fun to watch. I mean, people enjoy it, even if you haven't naturally been a Chiefs fan, and it's just great for the whole Kansas City and Kansas, Missouri area.
That's great. So in Wichita, I don't want to presume, but sometimes in Western Kansas, you've got people rooting for the Broncos. I grew up, my dad was from Texas, so I like the Chiefs and the Cowboys. Are Wichita folks dedicated to the Chiefs, or do they different loyalties to different teams?
Yeah, well, Kansas is such a big state, and the way the media markets break out is that in southern Kansas there are a few Cowboys fans because of media feed out of Dallas, and as you mentioned, western Kansas there's a few Denver fans, but most people in Wichita and most of the state are still loyal Chiefs fans. It's fun. It's a good experience, and we all enjoy that. And drive up and down the turnpike going to the game, you see the Chiefs flags flying back and forth on game day.
Yeah, I happened to be in Kansas visiting some family and went to the Dolphins game, which was the frigid, uh, unbelievably cold game. But it was great to have that experience with my family and
Yeah, I
be
think
part
that
of
was
that.
like the fourth coldest game ever. They
Yeah, it
talk about
was
the Ice Bowl in the Green Bay, but it was nice and chilly in Chief Stadium that day.
it was it. And you went to the Super Bowl, I believe, last year, you said?
We did. We went last year, Susan, my wife Susan and I, and had a great time. Obviously, it's fun to be able to go and cheer your team on and just live through that experience. And we kind of talked about going again this year, but I like having the remote in my hand. Be able to rewind that, to look at that great play or that catch, and also see if the refs got the call right or wrong.
Got it. Yeah. Well, pretty exciting time. So, well, there's a lot of things happening right now in the House, and you're in the middle of it. There's a big issue brewing, really that's pending, but the House passed a bill that includes a really important tax provision on immediate expensing of R&D spending. And why don't you take you have really led that fight, and just to provide some context, the bill that you offered that has that component within it, I believe had 218 co-sponsors, which is unusual to get, and about 100 Republicans, 100 Democrats, to have that much bipartisan support is really remarkable at a time when everyone's criticizing Congress for not getting anything done. You've really done the hard work to position the Congress to get that passed. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that provision, why it's important, and what you see as the outlook.
Yeah, well, the Tax Relief for American Workers and Families Act was such a great bipartisan bill. I mean, we actually passed it with 84% of the House membership, total, Republican and Democrats voted for the bill because there were so many good provisions in that to help out. And there were three provisions that had expired in 2022 that were really driving our economic growth. And one of them was to be able to immediately expense your R&D costs that have been the standard for years and had expired in 2022. Same thing with being able to immediate expensing of equipment purchases. Things like automobiles if you use it for a rental car or other places, and also the interest deductibility calculation. And so what we did was we worked on how do we get those provisions back in the tax code so that we can actually keep the economy going. We also looked at expanding and included in there to expand the child tax credits that we had put in place when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And basically the whole purpose there is how do we make sure that Americans get to keep more money in their pocket and to help with the struggles now we're seeing in the economy with interest rates so high, with taxes so high, inflation continuing to grow. that we're seeing people run down their savings and run up their credit card debt. And so this is going to be something that is going to help the economy. We One of the statistics that I like to quote, and you mentioned the research and development, which is I was the main sponsor of that as a standalone bill, and you mentioned the 218 co-sponsors,
Right.
is that we were averaging about 6% growth on research and development expenditures, and after that expired in 2022 and went down to where they had to deduct it over several years, that dropped to less than 1% of a growth in research and development. And it's so important for us to be able to look to the future. And we know that so many jobs follow research and development, as well as the jobs in doing the actual research. And they're well-paying jobs, and it's good to have those in America.
Yeah, and I think in your statement, and again, just explain the issues. What happens if this is not extended? Instead of deducting the full expenses in the first year, you have to do it over I think up to 39 years, if I'm correct.
And yep, there's
And
different years for different purchases. Yes. Yep.
and that's been proven to have a slowing effect on the economy. In other words, you want to incentivize people to spend the money right away because they get more benefit.
That's right. And particularly, depends on whether you're talking about depreciation of assets. Some of that can extend out to 39 years. Research and development would have been over 5 years for U.S. research and development, and 15 years if it was foreign research and development. We want to make sure that U.S. research and development you were able to write that off the year you incurred, and it has such a big effect, not just for big businesses, which is what people naturally might think about, but it affects all the way in small size business, in some degree even more so than larger, because the amount of cash. If you're a $3 million a year company or a $10 million a year company, and you make $1 million a year investment, if you can't write that off, then you're being hit with a big tax bill up front when you're trying to start a new product, start a new development.
Right, right. And I think in your statement you said that three-quarters of the funding goes to wages and salary, really right up front. So we're not talking. There's hard capital expenditures involved in this, obviously, but you have to pay the people to do the R&D work, and that has an immediate negative impact if you're not able to incentivize that right away.
That's right, and pay them. And particularly, our focus was how do we make sure that we pay them to do the work in America, and our competitors. At that point in time, the United States was under current law, the United States is only one of two countries in the developed world that actually require you to amortize that over 5 years or longer. And so we're competing against countries like China, where they're giving you a 200% deduction on your first year. So it's incredibly important for us to help get more workers in the United States and actually continue our economic growth.
Right. And as you've probably seen, is we do a report every year called Free Economies or Clean Economies. And we look at the Heritage Index of Economic Freedom, overlay that with the Yale Environmental Performance Index. And we've shown that the freer economies are twice as clean as the less free. And one of the indicators on economic freedom is good tax policy. So while I think that the radical degrowth left, they push things like the Green New Deal with these top-down command and control solutions. What I see you doing, and this is how Kansas ranchers and farmers think of business owners, is they believe in bottom-up problem solving and innovation. So is that part of your thinking, is that if we allow immediate expensing, we're actually doing something that's good for not just economic growth, but also the environmental performance of the United States compared to other countries?
It really is. I mean, we've seen throughout history that government mandated projects don't work. I mean, because the government is not nimble enough, it doesn't react, it doesn't know what consumers want, and it doesn't know how to pick the best technology. It focuses on who's the best political angle
Right.
to pick their winners and losers. And so you don't want a government-driven process like so many times occurs with the far left in terms of some of their policies. And instead, by putting in good market-based ideas, you see this kind of good growth, good ideas. The best ideas bubble to the surface, and they get rewarded for that, which incentivizes people to go out and make additional good ideas. And you look back at American innovation. over the last 30 years, you look at, for example, the carbon reduction of what's going into the air and atmosphere of the carbon dioxide is primarily driven off by the United States, and it's driven by the innovative and new techniques using recovery methods, using exploration methods, and
Right.
I talk a lot about how good, clean American natural gas is a lot
Right.
better than the dirty Russian gas because of American technology.
Well, that's exactly right. And this is what a lot of climate activists don't like to admit is that the primary reason for our CO2 reductions is because of natural gas.
Yep.
And if we have a time at the end, we'll talk more about natural gas. But I want to just sticking on the immediate expensing. This has passed, as you mentioned, it passed the House. I think what 325 to 70, if I remember, or
That
357 to 70. Yes,
357. That's right.
80%. Big passage. Now it's in the Senate and it's stuck. What's holding it up in the Senate? What is your outlook? How should taxpayers think as they're thinking about they're working on their taxes now? Should
Yep.
they wait to hit send on their tax return until this gets resolved? Where
Yeah.
do you see this head in the next few weeks?
Yeah, it's one of these things about the way the Senate works. They've gotten caught up over the last couple of weeks trying to work through a couple of a border bill with funding for Ukraine and Israel. So that ate up some time on their schedule, the way their clock works. And then over the weekend, they were in focusing on just the funding for Ukraine and Israel. So that just consumed all of their legislative time on their calendar. And so now the focus is, okay, how do we focus on getting that moving forward? Unfortunately, in this, even if a bill like this, it got broad bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats. They have to think through how you run it. I mean, you could run it as a standalone bill in the Senate, and I think it would pass. But we've gotten in such a bad habit over the last 20, 30 years of consolidating bills together that can be easily passed because you get a lot of thought process into all the different provisions, and so they're thinking through how to do that. I don't know of any reason that it would not pass. In fact, when it does come to the floor in the Senate, there's probably have 70 votes or more
Yeah.
for support. So it's not like it's not going to happen. We have talked. Chairman Smith has had conversations with the IRS commissioner. In fact, the IRS commissioner is coming to Ways and Means Committee tomorrow.
Oh,
And
good.
I'm sure one of our questions is going to be, you're comfortable with what you've talked about of being able to implement this provision when it's put in place so that people can actually use it for their tax returns. And so I think continue along the process that you normally follow doing your taxes. If you want to get them done early, go ahead and do that. And if you need to, you can make an amended return, and go forward.
Well, let's hope it moves fast. But speaking of amendments, my understanding is if the Senate could, I think, as you put it, I think it's common sense. If they put this bill on the floor, it would sail through. But of course, the question is, if you have one having worked for a senator for a number of years, they like to offer amendments, and if one insists on offering an amendment, that can slow the process. Do you sense that you're going to be able to work together at the House and Senate at the committee chairman level to work through any questions about the child tax credit, other controversial provisions that could then complicate passage in the House if the Senate modifies the bill in any way?
It's really a tango process that you go through with the Senate in terms of offering all of those amendments and how that process happens. The House is much more nimble in terms of the majority getting legislation passed. There's even a scenario where the Senate could offer several amendments, actually pass them, and then offer one wraparound amendment at the end to put the original wording back in place so that it actually what gets voted on as final passage is the bill exactly as written to it. So, there are, because this is a bipartisan pulled together bill. Obviously, there were some agreements on both sides of I prefer having this in it, and that kind of lines up some of the individual tax relief along with the business tax relief provisions, as well as having a pay for for the tax implications. And so depends on what the amendment would be that would come from the Senate that might have some impact on timing and what that would cause some thought process in the House. But as we talked about earlier, 357 members voted for it. So it'd have to be some major off the wall change that would affect enough people to change that process.
Well, we'll be following that closely. And speaking of pay fors, you just offered a bill, I believe today, reintroduced the balanced budget amendment. Describe your thought process there, why that's important for Congress to tackle.
It's so important. Our debt has become such a major problem. I mean, and it's happened under both Republican and Democrat presidents, and it's happened with the Republican majorities and Democrat majorities in Congress. It's so much easier over the last 20 or 30 years to actually just add more spending, whether it's increase their regular appropriations or whether it's add a supplemental. And there's a lot of good things you can spend money on that people want. But just like us at our home life, like business operations, you have to sort out the wants and the needs. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's not been the past practice for the last 30 plus years going through that. So we uh, we've got to focus on how do we rein in spending and get that aligned with our revenue. Our revenue is continuing to go up. Since we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we've had continuous growth in revenue coming in, but spending has grown even more. And now we're at the point where some of the automatic spending programs, if you total all of them up, are more than what we bring in revenue. So it's a broad-based issue that we've got to address with the normalization of interest rates. And I say normalization because they were artificially low through most of the 20 teens, and now they're back to more of a normal standard. We're actually paying more in interest, and that right now we're paying more in interest than all of the non-defense discretionary spending. And by this time next year, we will be paying more in interest than all of what we spend on defense.
Yeah.
So it cost us more in interest with what we borrowed than to defend the country.
Yeah, and that should be an alarming stat because when we talk about interest payments, we're talking about real money. This is not an abstraction. That's money taken out of the economy, taken away from small businesses, taxpayers in your district, instead of doing the work of innovation, creating new technologies, higher wages, cleaner technology. We're just burning that in a bonfire. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's money that's gone. It can't buy anything for the Defense Department to help defend the country. It can't support any education programs. It can't support any health programs or environmental programs. And so that money's just gone. And it's all a matter of it's been so easy to just spend more money. And part of it's because in years past, decades past, America's been a strong country, and we've been fiscally responsible. And so people were willing to lend us money because they knew they'd get paid back. And now we've got to prove that we will be fiscally responsible. So we've got to rein in our spending and align that with our revenue. And in some cases that's going to address the discretionary side, which we've looked a lot at over the last few years. But now we've got to start addressing some of the tougher automatic spending programs, Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and food stamps and all of these programs that are continuing to grow. They're on automatic pilot,
Yeah.
and we've got to do it in a bipartisan fashion. We're actually looking at doing a fiscal commission, which
Yep.
don't want that to be an avenue to put off the problem, but
Yeah.
you want it to be able to help address some of the political ramifications and make sure that there is a bipartisan solution.
Yeah, well, yeah. My old boss Tom Coburn worked on the Simpson Bowles Debt Commission, and sometimes that can be a very useful way to get at some of these issues where you've got to change the autopilot. If we don't adjust the autopilot, we'll have a crash, and that's going to hurt everybody. It's going to hurt low-income people the worst.
It really is, and it's unfortunate there's too many people here that play the political games of being instead of actually focusing on this is a real problem, and yeah, it may not be causing crisis today, but it is going to cause a crisis in 5 years or 6 years or 8 years, and it's not what the burden that you want to leave for your kids and grandkids and great grandkids. And so it's something that we've got to stand up. We've got to have the political will. We've got to stop the political games and actually focusing on leading America in the right direction.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for your time and your leadership on immediate expensing and our spending trajectory. And we know you've got to run, but we'll follow this work closely. And you can follow us at c3newsmag.com, and I hope to have you on again.
All right. Thank you, John. I enjoyed it.
Thanks.